through the details with the session objectives and also presenting all the, also calling his panelists. Okay, allow me to welcome the moderator, Mr. Mahmoud Kamara. He's a regional director of International Fund for Public Interest Media. Mr. Mahmoud, you have the floor. Please give him a round of applause. Let's stick to the time. We have 45 minutes for this panel session so that we move to the next one.
We don't have an hour, right?
No, not an hour.
Okay, greetings everybody, greetings, and Akwaba to Accra. My Sierra Leonean name is Mahmoud Kamara. My Ghanaian name is Kofi, because I'm a Friday born. And this is a panel for young people. Can I hear the young people in the hall? Excellent, excellent, excellent. We want to keep this energy level very high because we're just coming from lunch. And sometimes people describe this session as a graveyard session. But we're going to keep it live because we are dealing with the people with the life of the continent. We are dealing with those who hold the future of the continent in their hands. We are dealing with the generation that will determine where we move next in terms of how we engage with transitional justice processes. I'm not going to go over the objectives of the session because I expect or I suspect that you all have received your concept notes and the agenda, which clearly outlines what the objective of the session is. So I'm going to go straight to call in my panelists, a dynamic team of experts and individuals who are going to mesmerize us with how youth and young people are engaging or could be engaged with transitional justice issues. The first on my list and that I want to invite to this platform is Mr. Lennon Monnier. Is Lennon in the room? Please put your hands together for Lennon. Lennon is a career diplomat with academic foundation in international relations and politics. He holds a master's degree in international relations from the prestigious University of Witwatersrand. The man has to include prestigious in the introduction of the university. And in 2017, Lennon transitioned into the role of the researcher at the African Peer Review Mechanism at the Continental Secretariat, which is a specialized agency of the African Union that was established in 2003 under the auspices of the New Partnership for Africa's Development. The APRM, for some of you who don't know, serves as a pivotal instrument for sharing insights, reinforcing exemplary practices, identifying gaps, and evaluating capacity building requirements for the promotion of democracy and good governance. My next speaker is my next panelist is Mr. Jonathan Ralph Kadurira. Do we have Jonathan in the room? Please join me in welcoming Jonathan. Please, a round of applause. Allow the one. Jonathan is an author. He's also a trainer and a development consultant. He's a business and social entrepreneur. Only one person with so many titles. But he's the lead consultant of Piga Consultancy and the MD of Springtide, a group that is operating in Zimbabwe and South Africa. He founded the Mesh Global, which is a platform for youth dialogue and innovation. And he hosts a radio show called In Pursuit of Purpose. Interesting. He's also a publisher of 6 books. Where do you find the time, my brother? My next and third speaker is a troublesome young lady who has decided to leave Africa and went to Trumpland. But she's a fantastic woman, Yunaisi Kisiwajian Nanakusi. I'll call her Nanakusi. Please join me in welcoming Nanakusi. Nanakusi is a friend, and she's a youth peace and security expert and gender consultant with over 8 years of experience advancing youth participation in governance, peace building, and security issues across the continent. Her expertise spans policy development, diaspora, civil society engagement, project management, and international development. Now you want to work out, my sister. The next speaker after Nanakusi is Sedelami Inshingani. I hope I pronounced that well. Sedelami. Is it correct? Ish. Sedelami Inshingani is a communications and public policy expert with over a decade of experience advancing inclusive governance, gender equity, and civic engagement across the continent. Please join me in welcoming Sedelami. Fantastic. Now, perhaps just to set the scene, and I'm going to start with you, Lennon, just to give you heads up. Just to start the scene, I don't know how many of us here are familiar with what we refer to as transitional justice. Please, with a raise of hands. TJ, who is familiar with what we call transitional justice here? I see the usual suspect, Andrew, Ambassador Salah, Madam Patience, and who else? So this is actually going to be an interesting conversation because we're also going to use the opportunity to learn each other and to educate each other on what transitional justice means. But I'm going to start with Lennon before I take my seat. Lennon, I want you to briefly tell us about the APRM. I introduced you and as a staff of APRM. I want you to let my audience know what APRM does, how its mandate as a continental framework or as a mechanism of the AU has served or could serve Africa's agenda for a peaceful and accountable continent with young people at the heart of those processes. Just give us a few seconds while the sound system is.
Yes, this one is working. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to repeat the question again.
Yes, I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm very honored and blessed to be here in Accra, Ghana. This is my second home. Before I answer the question, I want to acknowledge the presence of the director of APSA, Madam Patience Shiradza, my elder brother, Mr. William Karu, the head of ECOSOC that deals with civil society, Ambassador Salah Mohammed, the head of the AGA Secretariat, and really congratulate them and thank them for this wonderful program, the 13th edition of the AGA High-Level Dialogue, in particular the Youth Consultation. I work for the African Peer Review Mechanism. It's an institution developed by African heads of states in 2003. Maybe by show of hands, how many of you know the APRM by show of hands? Okay, it means that this is a very timely question. The African Peer Review Mechanism was developed in 2003, born out of NEPAD, as a response by African heads of states to deal with the challenge of democracy on the African continent. Its primary mandate is to do peer reviews, governance peer reviews, in 6 broad thematic areas, the most popular being democracy and political governance, socio-economic development, corporate governance, e-governance, socio-economic development, as well as state resilience to disasters. There's a broad questionnaire of AU shared values. These are standard normative frameworks on governance that are developed and adopted by African countries including the transitional justice policy of the African Union developed in 2019. We basically go into countries, and countries first peer, they self-evaluate themselves based on this broad questionnaire, and developed a self-assessment report. Ghana was the first country to open itself up for this country peer review process. At the moment, there are 44 countries that are member states of the APRM. It's a voluntary institution. So not all AU member states are member states of the APRM. We've also been given the task to produce a biannual report on behalf of the AGA-APSA platform that looks at governance, including the transitional justice policy and policies that have to do with good governance. The first one, particularly for students, looked at the baseline called AU Shared Values. The second one looked at Africa's future scenarios and predicted some of the things that we're seeing on the African continent now. The third one looked at unconstitutional changes of government in Africa. And the fourth one, which will be launched here in Accra, looks at natural resource governance. And between us, I think, based on what the leadership has been saying, it's not yet confirmed, but the next Asia will possibly look at youth coinciding with the 20th anniversary of the African Youth Charter next year. So that's just a sum of what we do at the African Peer Review. Now, since 2017, when the African Union had the theme of the year, harnessing the demographic dividends through investments in youth, the then head of the APR Forum of Heads of States, President Idris Deby, decided to mainstream youth participation within the APRM process. And I think the APRM process itself was also learning from the AGA Secretariat's work with high-level dialogue. And we started a youth symposium. So in all our reviews, we have started engaging young people. On an annual basis, we host the African Peer Review Mechanism Youth Symposium. And I want to give credit to the AGA Secretariat for being one of the leading institutions within the AU family in engaging young people. We are at the 13th AGA high-level dialogue and its pre-summit events.
Can I ask you to pause there and ask that we give a round of applause to AGA for that? That's a really important recognition.
Yes, so we took the clue from the AGA Secretariat, and we've been engaging young people virtually, including X Spaces online. I think you have attended an X Space where we're mobilizing young people to support the theme of the year. We have a podcast, Africa Governance Voices. And while I'm telling you the work that we do, we actually also plead to other AGA-APSA family members of the African Union to also replicate this model of engaging young people based on their mandates.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you very much. Please, let's thank Lennon with a round of applause for that. We'll come back to Lennon later on, but for now, I want us to move on to Jonathan. Jonathan, you are the founder of a platform that facilitates youth dialogue and promotes innovation. What are the emerging trends that we are currently missing in our efforts to involve youth and young people in conflict dialogue processes or governance dialogue processes in the continent? Are you seeing any new tools and approaches that political actors and stakeholders should explore to increase youth participation in governance and transitional justice processes? Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think for starters, I would want to probably mention the organization that you're talking about, which is the Mesh Global.
Yes.
And we have chapters in Zimbabwe, Harare, Cape Town, Kenya, and in the UK. And having been working, one of the things that I've realized is, just before I get into your question deeply, is that we, as youth, we do not realize, especially on the African continent, that we are but one people. Anyone who speaks Swahili in here, quickly, please? Thank you. Anyone who speaks Chichewa? A little bit. Anyone who speaks Shona in here? There we go. Let's start with you. What's ndege in your language, in Shona? What's ndege? Ndege, aeroplane. And Swahili, what's ndege in your language? What's ndege? Yeah, ndege, something like that. Ndege is, okay, what is it in English? Yeah. Sorry? Airplane. Chichewa? Aeroplane as well. So you see, these are all different languages in different space, in different areas in Africa, but if you want to really look at these languages, you really find something that we are actually but one people. And this is one thing that we, as youth, we are not really, getting to understand, and that's why we fight a lot, and there's so much toxicity on our platforms, on X, we would call them tours and something along those lines, because we do not understand we are just but one people. And to get into your question, I think as the youths, we need to be involved entirely. One of the things that I've seen mostly, especially with platforms similar to these, is we are getting consulted, and we are being involved in the ideation of the process, but would want to move from ideation into implementation and even into monitoring as the youth. We need to implement some of the ideas that we really come up with on such platforms like this. And one of the emerging trends that I've seen is that of hubs, youth hubs. We have got so many hubs. We've got AfriLabs. I think it's based in Nigeria. I attended one of its conferences last year in Cape Town. And it's doing amazing work. There are so many hubs, but most of them, even including us at the Mesh, we have realized that most of these platforms, we have got a business bias. We are tending to talk about business issues more and forgetting about other issues which are important, which we are discussing right now. And I think we need to tap into those spaces and develop youth hubs for policy making, for policy development, so that we talk about these things. So that's one thing that I've realized, even government stakeholders and all that, we should tap into that. Have youth hubs that primarily focuses on development of policies and all of that. And just to then talk about the tools that I have seen that I think we should harness as well and take advantage of, AI. As the youth, we are primarily living our lives online. We are a digital, generation. Our lives are mostly lived online. Everything that we do is based online. We are learning online. We interact online. We are dating online. Everything is just online. So we need to have tools, to use those tools so that we talk about the issues, about transitional justice and all that on those platforms. Let's develop AI tools that get to analyze, the sentiments that youth talk about online. Just analyze that data. What are we talking about on those platforms? What are the responses concerning these issues? Let's have AI tools like that so that we do. And another thing which I would also recommend is the gamification of these topics, this topic that we're talking about right now. Let's have games, games that help the young people to critically think, negotiations, games that don't only give us pleasure and, a relaxation, but games that help us to critically think issues that are pertinent to our growth as a youth and as a society.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Please, let's give Jonathan a round of applause. I'm going to restrain myself from summarizing what has been said, because it will take a lot of time. I want to give an opportunity for us to interact with our speakers. But there are two things that have been said, and what Jonathan just mentioned, not just the gamification, but the socialization of political and policy processes. in our daily lives with youth to ensure that we move away from the serious, very, very serious way we engage with transitional justice issues using apps. Really, really good point. And I know that institutions like Impunity Watch has been engaging or interacting with a lot of other organizations on how they increase the role of young people or youth in transitional justice processes. So we'll come to that later on. Our troublemaker, Nanakusi, Kisiwa. Now, you have been a youth peace advocate for as long as I've known you. And I would like you to tell us your experience or experiences of how young people or youth have been engaging with Continental instruments. You know, Lennon mentioned the AU Youth Charter, and he also mentioned the AU Transitional Justice Policy, and a number of other instruments that the AU has put together. To what extent do you know of how much young people have been engaging with these processes, or how much they have not been even engaging with these processes? And what has been your experience in terms of what could be done better?
Thank you very much. Again, I would like to thank Aga Absa for bringing us here. It is very important we have these conversations because it is the most vital part, conversations. First, we are all here because we have similar understanding and we share similar views that youth participation in governance, peace and security, reparation, and everywhere is not merely a matter of symbolism. It is very instrumental to the development on the continent. Our tenacity, our solidarity, our innovations is what is driving the continent now. As many of them said, youth is not for tomorrow. Youth is for today. There is the African Youth Charter, which states in details how we are supposed to be empowered and how we are supposed to be brought to the table. Unfortunately, most of the youth here do not even know the document. Not because it's not visible to us, because we've not taken time to read it. And if you don't read, you wouldn't know. One thing we should know is, as we involve in civil conversations, as we do all the policy dialogue that is supposed to help governments, put us in a position of participation, we should also build ourselves, empower ourselves, so we will be able to make meaningful justice or make meaningful assertions when we are being put on the table. The table is for us, just as much as it's for the elderly. But with our empowerment, we will be able to have that conversations that will make sense to both us as youth and the elderly. There are some few recommendations I'm going to give, but prior to that, I will equally talk about youth in the diaspora, because that is where the problem is. When we are talking about reparation and transitional justice, it may seem very abstract to a lot of people, especially when the moderator, Mr. Mahmed, asked how many of us know about transitional justice. Just a few of us. It is not far from us. It is very near, okay? And if you think we are doing too much by asking for justice, as I said in my earlier submission, justice is giving to man what is due him. So if you took us through slavery and we are coming back to heal, to move from there, that justice is giving back to us what is due us. That is not us feeling entitled, that is not us doing too much. All we are asking is, what is due us, let us have it in the right way. We shouldn't look at it in the realms of tokenism. We shouldn't look at it in the realms of any tete-a-tete. We shouldn't look at it in the realms of false reciprocity. We should just look at it in the realms of justice. The recommendation is going to come through from the macro perspective and the micro perspective. The micro is we, the young people here. Over 50 of us, over 70, I guess, are young people. It's our time to do better as individuals so we can also be recognized. The first I will talk about is young people, let's stay informed, connected, and passionate. Passion is one thing that will drive us to our purpose, okay? So the more we keep ourselves informed, the more we learn, the more we try to do more in advocacy in different spaces, the more we get better. Better comes with experience. Better comes with doing more. Better comes with looking for more knowledge. That's how it happens. Another one I would say is young activists must engage in continual dialogue with elders and historical aspects to gain insightful perspective, to forge sustainable, knowledgeable advocacy. The intercontinental or the intergenerational dialogue must keep coming. One thing is, if we keep saying it's our time, and we tend to bring down all the efforts the people who led us have done just to make us this way, we will be shooting ourselves in the leg. We must only learn from what they have done and then move forward. It's incremental. You build on concepts. If you can take some examples, the Jewish people that were given some compensation from the Holocaust, it didn't start now. Their compensation came later. They started. It is our turn to pick up the mantle and move forward. The third thing I would say for young people will be, let's get inspired in optimism by envisioning a world where holistic wrongdoing is being rectified through stakeholder engagements. Let's come together and do it together. When you see your colleague doing one thing on peace and security, join him do peace and security. Your peace and security in Africa is not different from your peace and security in Nigeria. It's not different from Congo. It's not different. We may have different aspects of it, but we are all looking for peace, and that is where our mind should be. So if you are a civil society organization joining another civil society organization to work, it should be on the onus of peace. Okay. That is the way forward.
I'm going to pause you there. I know you have a long list of recommendations. Okay, yeah, final one, and I'll move to Sadila.
Okay, my final recommendation will be at the macro level, where we have members of states in there. The problem or the little issue I have with is that most member states have not yet ratified the Youth Charter. So the only way the African Union can do best for us as Africans, because just as the director said, they are all Africans. They are just there as individuals working for Africa. The only way we can do better is for member states to rectify that document that will let us operate in good mandate. Because if member states do not do that, all the efforts and all the energies we are putting in will fall on the surfaces like debris. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nadakusi. Please give her a round of applause. Thank you. Sidalame, you are the communications person and policy expert, not just communications and policy experts, right? And I would like to get your thoughts on how the various forms of increasing youth engagement, how they have been communicated, and to what extent, how agencies have used communications tools and channels to increase the involvement and engagement of young people in transitional justice processes.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, fellow young leaders, good afternoon. Let me just start by addressing the elephant in the room. I'm much older than I sound. I've actually participated in 3 general elections, including what the BBC referred to as a political earthquake. We'll discuss it on the sidelines. And I was also an African Union election observer for the historic South Africa's general elections. I had the pleasure of meeting His Excellency Bankole and Madame Patience, who were excellent leaders. I start with this by highlighting that communication is not just press releases and policy briefs and newsletters. However, even youth inclusion is communication. At the South African general elections, when young people saw fellow young people as election observers, it actually communicated that young people are actually included and actually very vital in the peace processes. So I share this to highlight that we shouldn't just think of communication in a linear manner, because this generation is a generation that Freedom Square politics doesn't resonate with us. a lot of policies have been written. We don't need new policies. What we lack is the implementation. So when it comes to communication and public policy, a lot of people always wonder why I combine the two. However, I've realized that I have a knack for actually reading policies and then translating them to public engagement that can actually resonate with people. For example, in Botswana, we had an impending constitutional review process. A lot of young people didn't know the Constitution. However, after reading the Constitution and engaging legal experts, we created a 4-part docuseries that informed young Botswana about the Constitution and what the constitutional review process entails. So a lot of young Botswana were actually involved in that. So I share this to highlight that we shouldn't think of communication and including young people in the conventional sense. However, even youth inclusion and youth representation is also a form of communication.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, please. So I really like this last point because it has been a recurring challenge in how we communicate and engage with young people when it comes to issues that we consider as very serious, whether it's governance transitions or political transitions or transitions from conflicts. And we tend to put media and communications at the bottom of the pile. I have repeatedly argued for the mediatization of transitional justice in terms of how we use media and comms to ensure inclusion, diversity, agency, and voice of young people. And the mediatization of transitional justice is not just, it's not a new concept, actually. It's been used in different countries. I come from Sierra Leone, and I experienced the war as a war survivor. And we know how the media played a significant role in ensuring that we not just accept the young people who were the foot soldiers of the conflict, but also those who were playing a crucial role in ensuring that the war or the peace processes hold ground. We currently have a number of conflicts in the continent, and I'm going to move to our next set of questions. A lot of us here are not familiar with transitional justice. A lot of us here are also not familiar with some of the very terrible conflicts and crises that are actually happening in the continent. And Lennon works with an institution that gives him an opportunity to have a bird's eye view of the various processes that are taking place in the continent. And I'd like him to share briefly some of his thoughts and perspectives on some of those conflicts and the role that young people could play in ensuring that these conflicts don't further escalate, and the role that government can also play to ensure that young people are not just used or misused and then later on rejected. Lennon.
Thank you for that good question. I don't think we can talk about transitional justice policy on the African continent without being in solidarity with the people of Sudan, where close to 11 million people are internally displaced and million others moving out to Ethiopia, Chad, South Sudan, and other neighboring countries. Now, when we are having a theme of the year that's looking at reparations and justice, it can then be overshadowed by the crimes against humanity that are currently taking place in Sudan and affecting mostly young people, because it's young people that are carrying arms and fighting this, to some extent, senseless war. You also have in DRC a conflict, and I'm happy that there was a peace deal signed. But in many African capitals, in Nairobi, we see young people protesting. And I ask myself at times this question, that we are in the digital age where from a click of your phone, you are on X Spaces, you're on YouTube, and we can't be, or we've dropped the ball in solidarity. And I think to some extent it's a shame on us and we're making a historic mistake in that when our forefathers who pushed the wave of Pan-Africanism that led to African independence, they didn't have telephones. They were writing letters to each other, and they were so connected and in so much solidarity in that the injury of young people in 1976 in South Africa became a global call to defeat apartheid. But today, we look the other side, while there are so many atrocities being committed on the African continent. So I think it's up to us, this generation, to up the ante as far as being in solidarity with whatever is happening in different parts of the African continent. It could be in Togo, it could be in Nairobi, it could be in Harare, it could be in Johannesburg. We need to do better as far as solidarity is concerned, and we have the tools to do that. On the same scope, our engagement with the diaspora, my sister mentioned, is extremely low. We should be having one voice with the African diaspora, particularly Brazil and the Caribbean. The Caribbean, as you are aware, have the CARICOM 10-point plan for reparations. I think they're a bit more organized than we are at the moment. However, I know that by the end of the year, I think based on the conversation that was taking place online with ECOSOC the day before yesterday, we're seeing unity of African people as far as the issue of reparation is concerned. Outside of Africa, Brazil has the biggest population of African people. Why is it that we cannot mobilize with the youth of Brazil, the youth of Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad, and all other Caribbean countries to have this global call for reparations? I think we have a stronger call for it. Then lastly, you see, because of the privilege I have and the work that I do as far as engaging young people, I've also picked up that this topic of reparations at times feels so far-fetched from ordinary young people. I'll give you a good example. About 3 months ago, we did an X-Space, an online X-Space, with an institution called ULEAD. It's based in Arusha. That also does a lot of youth engagement. Now, on average, when I go on X and we are trying to explain African Union policies to young people, you have at least minimum 1,000 people. We're trying to explain the theme of the year to young people with ULEAD, and we had about 20, 30 young people join online, and I vividly remembered that. Now, to someone whose challenge is youth unemployment, how do you start explaining the issue of asking for stolen goods that are in London museums? So we also have the task as those that are seated in this room to break down this conversation, the big issues of decolonizing global institutions such as the World Bank, how credit rating agencies, for example, make it very difficult for young people to access loans, and how the financial system is skewed, representation at the United Nations Security Council, and all these big issues that look at times for an ordinary young people in the streets of Accra could be out of his world, and make them understand how it then affects them. So we have a big task that for the next decade, as we heard, that it's now a decade of reparations. It's not only a year that we're dedicating, that we start breaking down some of these big ideas that are there, including the big Agenda 2063 of the African Union. Yes, yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this is a really, really important point, and sometimes we tend to ignore the enormous task that we have as a people to self-educate, to deconstruct some of these things and make them less jargony in terms of how we engage different demographics. Now, my next question, I don't know how we're doing for time because I want to really give an opportunity to the audience to ask the panelists. But my next question is for you, Jonathan. You mentioned earlier the importance of socializing some of these issues. I think it's kind of related to what Lennon just mentioned. Using existing apps that are currently business-focused to ensure that we engage with transitional justice or reparatory justice issues in a way that meets the consumption patterns of young people. Now, could you please tell me, because Lennon was talking about how we simplify the messages that we use to encourage more engagements from young people. In your writings, in your engagement with young people, what are some of the things that you feel could easily resonate with young people to engage with transitional justice or reparatory justice issues in a way that makes them feel like they have a stake in these processes?
All right, thank you so much for that. I think one of the key things that I've seen, which is really important, I think it has been said, especially from the last session, and she mentioned that term. There is the term intergenerational dialogue. I think there's that disparity where, the problems that we're facing now as youths sort of like blind our eyes for us to see certain things. The issue of identity, knowing where we are coming from, we might not have the time because we are pressed with bread and butter issues. So I don't know how we are supposed to fix, because our primary problem is bread and butter issues. But in doing that, because there's always that sentiment to say, young people don't want to get involved in politics and all that, but everyone should get into that space. Many young people want to look for jobs, they want to get into business, but they do not know that the spaces that they are getting into, whether you're working or whether you're getting into business, it all comes down to policy, it all comes to politics. So we have to fuse, because getting the attention from bread and butter issues it can be a painstaking task. So let's fuse. I think that's also that's one of the things that we have also done as the mesh, to fuse business and social issues to make them, that's the term, the mesh. We are bringing those things on one platform, because it's difficult for you to talk sense to someone, to say you need to know who you are, where you're coming from, your identity. There were certain things of ours that were stolen. And like Lennon said, they are looking for jobs. So one of the key things is where the conversations of what they want to hear is happening, let's fuse these issues in so that they actually get to understand the importance. To say, for us to actually be here economically, it is because of these other issues. That's my thinking.
Absolutely, absolutely. And actually this reaffirms or is in line with what one of the greatest Pan-Africanists from the continent once said. Nkrumah once said that we have to seek ye first the political kingdom, and every other thing shall be added unto it. So, and this is what we fail to forget. We fail to acknowledge that if there is political instability, even your job is insecure. If there is political instability in your country or in your community, your entrepreneurship will be at risk. Nanakusi, you mentioned, I'm calling you Nanakusi throughout this. You mentioned the importance of solidarity, which is one thing I picked up, because we tend to live in the world now that is very individualistic. Africa is known for being communalistic. We do work as a community. But now, this is not a criticism of the young people, don't get me wrong. This is just a reflection of the current society that we live in, which is heavily influenced by individualistic and capitalist behaviors. Now, how would you promote solidarity among young people in transitional justice or reparatory justice processes in a continent that is hungry, that is wounded, that is unemployed?
Thank you very much. we shouldn't play with this adage. Together we stand, divided we fall. There's a typical example on Monday in the States, I think in New York, there's going to be a huge demonstration with people with African descent and then people who went, like we that moved here, from here to the US. The main issue of the fight is, or the demonstration is, they are taking our jobs. So the Black Americans says they are Americans, they are not Africans. Because in America, you either have one color or the other. You are either black or white. That's how the identity conversation goes as far as it can. And the black people with businesses says, we are here, it's our land, we pay taxes, we can equally have access to everything. The Black Americans who do not genuinely think they are Africans because they were born in America think you are on our land and you are taking our jobs. Building solidarity comes from two phases. One, you need to get involved, and two, you need to know what you are getting involved with. We are all here. The unions and the states have done so well by bringing to us the African Free Continental Trade Area. I hope I did the flow very well. Yes. How many of us do know even any documents about this Free Continental Area? How many of us understand the dynamics? Do you know countries that fit together do not fight? That means if you are in Nigeria and you are able to bring your products here in Ghana, free of a lot of things through the African Continental Free Trade Area, it means you wouldn't be fighting someone simply because the person is from Sierra Leone or Uganda. The conversation becomes free continental area. All of us are free to operate, free to get money, free to get access to funds. Let's just get involved because, hey, we only have one Africa and it's ours. We cannot trade it for anything. Let's all get involved. That is how we are going to move.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nanakosi. And Sidilami, before I come back to Lennon and Jonathan, it is, when you spoke earlier, you mentioned about the importance of ensuring that we don't overcomplicate the communications processes. I'd like to hear from you in terms of how, and the creative industry in the continent is dominated by young people, but it's heavily underutilized by policymakers and those of us who are in the NGO space. What advice will you give as a communications person, as somebody who sits in the intersections of communication and policy? What advice would you give in terms of how we engage with the creative industry to ensure that policy issues, when people like Lennon sits somewhere and speak big grammar, and we bring it to to our young people out there, they are able to engage, but using their own diction. They are using their own platforms. They are using their own channels within the creative spaces to ensure that we advance this cause.
Thank you. Well, I think there is a gap between policymakers and leaders because many of these people in these spaces have been groomed to be a diplomat behaves and speaks in a certain way. Even if you are a speechwriter, there's a certain way you have to write a speech for a diplomat. So there's that intersectionality where there needs to be a mindset change at policy level so that when you bring in a communications expert, you don't come with a blueprint saying, write a policy brief, write a newsletter. However, give the communications professional creative freedom to be able to translate the policy while maintaining the essence and the integrity of what you're trying to communicate. Because we're not trying to dilute the policies, we are trying to ensure public engagement so that there's implementation and there's traction.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. And we're going to open the floor. We have just 10 minutes. But before we do that, at least two of the panelists mentioned a phrase called intergenerational dialogue. Now, we are privileged today to have in our presence the Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, who's Ambassador Bankole Adoye. Please, let's give him a round of applause. And I'd like to use this opportunity to kindly invite Ambassador Adoye to kindly speak. I know this is something that you are very much passionate and interested in, engaging with young people. I remember the last conversation on constitutional changes of government. You did mention the importance of engaging young people. And you've been here. We have been lucky to have you for this session. We cannot let you go without saying a few words to young people in the room. Over to you, Ambassador. Please, a round of applause for Ambassador.
Okay, I don't plan to speak because I came to listen. Because we are passionate about not just the dialogue. Many in the panel have spoken about intergenerational dialogue. Dialogue is between two people. But today, I would like to speak to you about intergenerational action. We must dialogue first before action. And what we want to see on our continent is for you to take leadership. And this is why we said to the team organizing this Continental Youth Consultations that we want to hear the voices of the youth, not the voices of Bankole and Ambassador William and the rest of us over the age gap. But we can guide from our experience. We can promote together what the African Union stands for, making sure that we have a dynamic voice, a dynamic force in our stakeholders. The youth are so critical to this theme, justice for all Africans and people of African descent through reparations. But reparations, as has been said, should not just be for the sake of tokenism or resources. Our greatest need on our continent is development, is justice, is right, is peace, and most importantly, stability. As one of the panelists said, without stability, no job, no creativity, no youth empowerment program will subsist. But I really want to appreciate all of you for coming from around the continent to come together for the dialogue series. But it's for a purpose. Africa needs transformation, and that transformation must be anchored on the youth taking leadership. The space is not there, we agree. But we have to expand the space. We have to promote your creativity, and that creativity can impact on what we do. The African Union is still, frankly, a space for the older generation. But we are making changes to accommodate you more. We are making changes to bring you to see democracy in action. We are creating the space to bring you to see how justice should be dispensed. And we have to create also the space for you to exercise your right. And that is the right to development, the right to peace, the right to education. All this will be critical as you move forward. So for me, I'm just a passerby today. I'm not in the speaking slot. I want to hear the voices of the youth. And when we speak about the African youth, as it's been stated, you must also remember the youth in the diaspora of African descent. We are one, and a united Africa of course, is better than a divided Africa. So I want to assure you that in the next few days, tomorrow, the women will be speaking particularly, and then on Tuesday, Wednesday, here in Accra, we'll be looking at how our best leaders, former, serving, we can now have this dialogue for action. Let's make this year not just the year for reparations, but a year about building our states, building our communities, and building particularly the youth. I thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And we will now open the floor for a few questions and comments for young people on the floor who have any questions for the panelists. Yes, my sister here, and Samir, and then I'm going to give 2 men, 2 women to ask questions. So yes, the sister with the green colored at the back will be the 3rd speaker. So we have 2 men, 2 women for now. I'll start here with my sister. Yeah. Try it again. Let me give you this.
It's okay. Thank you once again for this very powerful conversation and panel. I think mine is going to be very simple as a comment and to allude to most of what you have said, and especially Lennon. He brought out something very critical in his opening statement about how next year, or is it this year, that's going to mark 25 years. Next year is going to mark 25 years of the Youth Charter. Pardon? 20 years, yes. 20 years, sorry. And it brought me back to a point that I had emphasized in the earlier panel where I was speaking and stating that even with these legal and policy frameworks that we have, it's very important in the conversation of reparations or decolonization that we also rethink about the very structures that are meant to be the avenues of platform or policy for the young people, right? Because I strongly believe that many even of our African countries still mirror the colonial or post-colonial bureaucracies that limit this genuine participation to create youth empowerment, youth opportunities, or to reallocate the resources. So my question also to the APRM and anyone else who would want to answer this, how do you see us collectively as the African youth on the continent, and especially in the context of member states, rethinking and relooking legal frameworks for youth in the country, as well as this platform that is existing called the Youth Council? Joseph was on my panel, and I'd want to say that I had started this whole advocacy in Zambia of legal frameworks being revamped around youth councils, right? But when I got to my research, truly and indeed, Tanzania has got a youth council act or a youth act, but it's not in practice. And already that speaks to why some member states haven't also ratified the youth charter. So how can we create more accountability for these member states to do that? Thank you.
I've been hounded to wrap up. All right, so anybody wants to answer that quickly before I get to my next speaker so that we don't keep the audience? Lennon, there was a particular reference to you, or Jonathan, or anybody who wants to talk about that. And then Samir will ask the question, and then we'll go. There were a few questions earlier.
Thank you for that brilliant question. Yes, indeed, next year marks 20 years since the The African Youth Charter came into force in 2006. So it's an opportune time for the millions of those that are under the age of 35 that are referred as youth on the African continent to revisit and rethink youth development. And I think as the African Union, we have a lot of work to do to reunite the African youth development ecosystem. The institution, the African Union, has done a great job from Addis to create the Office of the Youth Envoy, to have the African Youth Division. But I think at an African Union member state, there's a lot of differences. So you have in South Africa, for example, where you have the NYDA, an institution that actually develops young people, is protected by legislation, and you have another country that doesn't have. You have the Pan-African Youth Union, which is working outside at times of the parameters of the African Union. It's almost as an independent institution. So I think the leadership of the African Union, and I'm glad Ambassador Bankole is here, I think there's a lot of work that's needed to harmonize and strengthen the youth development ecosystem, particularly structures such as the Pan-African Youth Union, National Youth Councils, and equivalent institutions at the member state level to actually do what they're supposed to do. Thank you.
Hi, hello, hello everyone. I'm Sami Aisawi from Algeria. So the thing is, with the high-level dialogue and the Continental Youth Consultation, what I'm constating is like there is youth who don't know and don't understand about what is the consultation is, what is youth is, what is their role, and what is transitional justice and what is justice. Youth in Africa don't know what is the organizations and what are they doing. They don't know any of that. They are not educated, or they don't have knowledge about that. So right now, if we are talking about a youth charter, in my knowledge, there is some countries that didn't really ratify the youth charter. Based on what exactly, I don't know, and that's what I'm trying to highlight it. So
Samir, let's do it quickly. Is it a question?
Yeah, it is a question.
Okay, can I get your question?
How can we do for ratifying charters and doing the frameworks for that, so we can help youth to more engage for that, for having tools for better engagement, and we can do for that, making it dynamic force for justice or anything else about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Who wants to get that? Nanakos, you want to get that? Okay, briefly, yeah. No.
Thank you very much. It takes us as youth, together with the different civil society organizations operating in the various countries, to talk to the government or to make advocacy cases to the government for them to understand the need for the signing or the ratification of the Youth Charter, so the youth can equally benefit from any other participation or anything. The thing is, when the civil society organizations, together with the various youth, we are not talking about demonstration, we are not talking about force. I know they understand the dictates of the charter. They just need to know that indeed, we the youth, we want the charter. So the civil society organizations, together with us as young people, tie into your question, I guess. They are supposed to do these advocacies so the governments will really understand what we need and they will be able to give it to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've just spoken about transitional justice and reparations, and some of the principal elements of reparations is acknowledgement as a first thing. So I want to firstly acknowledge that we will not have enough time to complete this conversation. And the second element of reparation is apology. I want to apologize to those who cannot be able to speak that we are going to wrap up now, and apologies for depriving you from asking your question. And I'm going to ask my panelists to use 1 minute so that I'm not held accountable Remember, 1 minute I've given them. If they don't stick to the 1 minute, it's not my fault. But I'll start with Sedolame. 1 minute to wrap up and let your audience know, if they are leaving this room, what is the one thing that you want them to remember about how youth and young people in the continent can be engaged in transitional justice processes or reparatory justice processes using communications?
Thank you. My advice to all of us in this room is that you can lead without a title. You don't wait to hold His Excellency Bankole's position to effect change. You start with what you have, with where you are. One of my favorite facets of transitional justice is accountability. The fact that you are here and you have the opportunity to engage with leaders and you are aware of certain policies and charters and protocols that maybe your cousins at the village or even in the city aren't aware of. It's up to you to have, instead of games night where you play 30 seconds, you actually engage them about these things and you actually mobilize fellow youth and it grows to a certain level. For me to get where I got, I actually started, I was funded by the US Embassy in Botswana as an individual because my Ministry of Youth wasn't supporting me. However, I started conversations about national interest issues and it grew. So my takeaway from all this should be start where you are with what you have.
Thank you very much, Sedolame. Nanakosi?
Talking about starting where you are, I think you should start now. The conversation must start now. We don't have to wait till tomorrow. Tomorrow is when we are going to reap the benefits of whatever we started now. If you don't start, we wouldn't reap any tomorrow. And again, justice is giving man what is due him. It's not the reason of tokenism. It's not a fight. We just want what you took from us. It is healing practice. It is understanding the dynamics. It's making people account for the things they did. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thank you so much. I think we have all agreed that there are certain issues from the youth charter to a whole lot of documents concerning us as the youth, which we all agree that many of us do not know. So I think it will have to start with us from here. We have been privileged enough to be in here. So my question, I think someone posed this question earlier on to say, what are you then going to do with this privilege? So the onus is on us to go out there. We have been given the opportunity to be in here to be discussing these things and we're agreeing on these things. So to whom much is given, much more is required. We need to go out there and do, conscientize our fellow youths who are in the rural areas, in the urban areas, everywhere in our countries to say, learn, know about these things so that we all progress together.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thank you. I'll be very short. We don't have to be diplomatic about asking for reparations. There's a number. I think in 2001, a figure of 777 trillion was demanded. They owe us, and we should be able to keep the fight alive. We should take lessons from countries that have been successful. I think Namibia, with the fight with Germany, is a powerful lesson, particularly also on a topic that we didn't discuss, on prioritizing some of the communities that were affected, the Herero and Nama people, and giving them a voice. Popular culture, I learned of reparations from Peter Tosh, Benning Spear, Bob Marley, way back as a child. And I think we can use popular culture to disseminate some of these big ideas. Then lastly, this is, to some extent, another victory for Pan-Africanism in that we are now picking up the fight for the second wave of justice and reparations. And we must make sure that we are connected with the rest of the global Africa, the sixth region, in fighting and bringing into task former colonial powers, religious institutions such as the Catholic Church, big multilateral institutions, and etc., in making sure that we document. We might not win now, but we'll keep the fight because this will probably take another century for us to get all the reparations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for the team. So as we wrap up, just to remind you that the African Union and its various affiliated organs have developed a number of initiatives and mechanisms to get young people involved. The Department of Political Affairs, Peace and Security has the Africa Union Youth for Transitional Justice Initiative. A number of other institutions, ECOSOC has been holding a series of conversations and continental dialogues with young people to make use of these initiatives, engage and interact. As Ambassador Bankole said, we are transitioning from intergenerational dialogue to intergenerational action. For me, that is my last and parting word for all of us here. Thank you very much, and have a blessed day.
Yes, please. Yes. Oh, okay, that's fine. Thank you. A round of applause for this energetic and vibrant panelists and the moderator. A round of applause. Okay, thank you so much for Lennon, Jonathan, Kisiwa, and Sili Dilimi, and also the excellent moderation by Mahmoud. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ambassador. Now, we move to the next session. After we unpacked the transitional justice, and also after we addressed the reparative justice from the two angles, the economic angle and also the political angle. And now it's our turn to know and unpack our role as young people in the continent. How do we move to action by addressing our role as young people in state building and good governance? Allow me to introduce our moderator for this session, Dr. Olachi Sandra. Please, you are welcome. She will take us through the session objectives, and she will also introduce her panelists. Please welcome Dr. Olachi Sandra.
Good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Sandra Ndukwe. I'm a medical practitioner and also a youth and women advocate. I also run a non-governmental organization which is centered around women, young people, and leadership. So I'm deeply honored to be moderating this next session, which is going to be on the role of young people in state building and good governance. Today, we meet at the intersection of memory and possibility, and a moment in Africa where Africa is being reshaped, not just by those in power, but by those who dare and who want a different kind of future. A future where reparation is not just rhetorical, but real. Where justice is not selective, but restorative. And where we, the young people, are not just victims and voters, but visionaries. Ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear. State building is not an agenda for cabinets, for commissions, and those in power. It is the courage, the desire of an average citizen who wants, insists, especially the young people, who demand justice, who wants accountability, who insist on inclusion. I do not want to waste your time, but in our panel is going to be 4 powerful speakers, people who have walked the walk. They are going to share their perspective, and we're going to ask questions. And these questions are, how can the young people promote good governance? How can we make sure or ensure that reparations are not just promises, but implemented? Ladies and gentlemen, our first speaker is Mr. Yoel Cathcart. I'm sorry if I murdered that. He's a passionate, award-winning peace and human rights activist. He's popularly known as Change the Cathcart, and he's the founder of PAPA, that is Pan-African Peacemaking Alliance. He believes that justice without the voice of the youth is justice half served. Please, let's welcome Mr. Yoel. Our next panelist is Mr. Stephen Harabib. He works with the African Union Transitional Justice Reference Policy. He's also a passionate advocate for youth inclusion, and he's also going to share his perspective with us. Welcome. Next is Molisa Muhaba from South Africa. He's a youth expert and a member of Youth Participation in Governance, Political Affairs, and Conflict Prevention in Africa. Please welcome Mr. Molisa Mashaba. The last but not the least is a dynamic, insightful, and very bold young lady. Her name is Ms. Gonaya Setora. She's a rising voice in civic transformation. She hails from Botswana, and she works with international trade policy experts at the African AFTA Secretariat. She focuses on women and youth in trade integration and agreement. Welcome. So now that we've introduced our change makers, let's dive into our discussion for today. So let's start with you. I think I have to sit. Thank you. Hello, okay. Thank you. So, Mr. Stephen, you've helped shape the African Union's transitional justice policy. How can the member states urgently address the gaps in promoting reparations?
Thank you. And just a point of correction, the transitional justice policy was really drafted and crafted by the people of Africa, okay, and the young people who really championed this work for over a decade. I joined this work in 2017, but there were many who had kind of gone ahead of us who laid the groundwork for it. And then when the policy passed in 2019, in a historic landmark engagement there in the EU, we're now trying to popularize that policy a lot more now. One of the ways that I think there's 3 things that I want to flag in terms of what states need to do, because I think we often talk about transitional justice, and the policy is a fantastic instrument and provides an anchor for what member states need to do. However, we have to think about the impact of trauma and pain that many of our African young people face as a result of atrocities, whether it's colonialism, slavery, genocide, apartheid, that was systemic in its response to the harm and violence. And so when we talk about transitional justice, we have to recognize the psychological lens and the social lens of harm that was perpetrated. And when we look at even when we talk about young people not engaging or they withdraw from participation in political processes, that is often a response of trauma. Second, I think we have to think about states working together with civil society and co-funding initiatives for healing. They have to think about how do we, as you rightly said, state building is a national issue. So how do member states work with civil society, youth organizations, and co-fund that work to say, we want to get this done, how can we do it, how can we put money behind it? Because a lot of the conversations we talk about policy not being implemented, well, it is expensive to implement some of these things. And so we need to find capital as well. And I think that speaks to the commitment of states to engage on that level. And then we have to think about the physical and emotional disruption that has taken place and what we need to do to rebuild memory, to rebuild trust in communities, that they are recognized, that their pain is seen, because a lot of the violence that has been perpetrated is subjective. The experience a lot of people feel is subjective to say, this is what pain looks like for me. So we have to be able to reimagine what governance empathy-led governance that listens to the people, hears what they're saying, and when communities are articulating and saying, this is what my pain feels like, and this is what my experience of harm that has been perpetrated looks like, and this is the redress that I see will be helpful for me as a victim or survivor of this atrocity, then we then start to craft and design responses accordingly. Otherwise, what we end up having then to do is just having tokenistic reparations, or having a lot of platitudes and articulations without real and meaningful change. And what that ends up doing is re-traumatize already traumatized people. Two, what it does is it then builds mistrust in the state to see it as a partner in healing and reconciliation, and then causes people not to be active participants in our governance conversations. And building that trust means that we have to move with care, because we're not just talking about policy from a letter of the law, but we're talking about the pain that has been inflicted on many people. We're talking about pain that has been inflicted on families, societies that have been disrupted and hurt. And so that rebuilding process has to be empathy-led and compassionate.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen. You've highlighted very interesting points. Now, over to you, Mr. Yo. As someone who has worked or who is currently working with, as someone who currently works with the youth and in post-conflict settings, majorly, tell me, what do you think has worked or will work when justice, and what does justice mean to young people?
Thank you very much. I just want to, it seems like there's no young people who are in the rooms. Well, let me just exercise this one in 30 seconds. When I say power, you say power. When I say woman power, you say woman power. When I say use power, you say we use power, okay? Woman power. Woman power. Use power. Use power. Thank you very much. We need, when we are in these spaces, we need actually to bring the energy into the podium. Power to the youth. Thank you very much. I think from the background of activism, we do actually engage with so many young people back home, in which when they hear word reparative justice or reparation in their locality, they have a language that these young people actually, discuss things based on their context, actually. To me, as a young person or as youth growing up in war and also being born in war, I look at it that the reparation justice is beyond financial benefits. You're saying that it is actually deep into our roots in the sense that we should not just talk on the reparative justice always when we are in need of the materialistic thing. So young people, they are connecting the dots in which they are asking for accountability, and also they are asking for to be heard as well, because that is the most important thing as a survivor. Actually, you also need people to hear you, to see you, and also to nurture you and show solidarity to you. So majority of the young people back home are actually, when they are aware of all this process, and by the way, we have this kind of mechanism in our traditional setting, but now we are forgetting them that we have such kind of instrument or tool in our setting. I'm very excited that I'm serving at the African Union reference group on transitional justice, in which we are actually contextualizing the African Union policies on transitional justice back home, into our local context, into our local languages, in which most of the young people will actually get to know and understand the policies in their local dialect, in which, to me, I do believe that when we talk of the reparation, it's more of accountability. It's more about talking about the first. It's more about, and also don't forget the invisible side of it, in which my friend Steve here also talked about it, which is on psychological aspect of it, in which we need to have the right mindset, whereby we can also, championing this kind of thing. So young people are asking for a structural reform in our community, because there are settings in which are not actually supportive to the young people back home. And also on the continent as well, there's a need for institutional reforms in all this setting. We should focus more on the legal aspect and also, on the policies as well, whereby we will have a document that is inclusive, an institution that is people-centered, and because most of these institutions that we are having today are not actually people-centered. There are serving individuals who got privileges to be there or to serve. So, to me, building a future, it should also come through education, where educating this young generation to know, and that is the work that we are actually doing back home, to let them know about the story, and also, to go through, in which they will also be strong in their advocacies. And also, don't forget the element of the reparation is more of these people. We are fighting back for our dignity. You're saying that, and that is the most important thing, and which it is the invisible side of it. So majority of the people are actually looking at it as financial support and whatever. And like, for example, in South Sudan, we have the two mechanism which was annexed by the president into the laws in November, in which majority of the survivors or majority of the population as all are thinking of maybe there will be compensation of money, compensation of this, compensation of that, and so, and which also they are fight of it. But the most important is we should also, inject and tell young people that it is beyond that. You think that, so it is beyond materialistic things, it is beyond financial things, so that let us change the mindset first, and then now they will just go and, and understand it by their own language. And that is what actually the Pan-African Peacemakers Alliance has been doing back home, creating an awareness, educating these young people, to know the context very, very, very well. And to understand also, not to forget that some years back, when I get an opportunity like this, or maybe on social media or other spaces, I always criticizing the African Unions, that because of the work that they've been doing. They are very slow, they are not this and that. But in 2022, I actually took my time to understand the system, how African Union actually work, and how these aid of state actually also work when they come, when they are in Addis. You seeing that? So to me, what I'm trying to say here is also young people should also understand that very well. You seeing that? In which they should also know how this thing works in their language. I was actually impressed by one of the communication and consultants, the lady was just sitting there, translating those policies into the youth language so that it will be also, very, very understandable. So to summarize, it's just accountability is number one to young people. That is the language that they're actually chanting always. But on how to get there is now, it is our responsibility as all. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your lucid presentation. Melissa, how can the voice of the youth be heard in promoting justice, democracy, and good governance?
No, thank you. And in the interest of time, I will try to keep it short. Firstly, the voice of the youth can be heard by us participating in the political spaces, because that's where the policy and legislature that are made, that runs the country. So a previous speaker here mentioned something about young people not interested in politics, and which is true. That's what we face even home where I'm from. But what I'm saying is that our voice can't be heard if we are outside. For us to be heard, we need to be inside those spaces. So it's very much important that we take politics seriously and actively participate, which some of us are already doing in our home countries. We are very actively participating. Although there's youth organizations and the mother body, which is for all ages, some of us have left the youth organization. We are directly inside with the mother body, participating with the elders. So that's how we can participate in terms of promoting democracy. And there's also a question of good governance. And this can be achieved through monitoring, which technology, it's on our disposal to monitor the process, and we have advantages, young people, in terms of adopting to technologies. So we need to make sure that we utilize the use of technology, because of there's a lot of corruption that happens because of lack of monitoring. So when there's corruption, you can't really build a state. So when there's monitoring, it improves service delivery. And when you improve service delivery, then you are playing a role in terms of building a nation. So I think, yeah, we need to be participating in political spaces, legislatures, make sure that more young people are in spaces like your parliament, where laws are passed and everything. So yeah, just to keep it short, I think we need to be where the decisions are being made. Because if we're saying the decisions are being discussed here and made here, you can't be sitting outside where the poll is. You need to be inside in order for your voice to be heard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those interesting points. Please, next question is to you. What practical steps can the African youth in diaspora take to mobilize support for reparations?
Okay. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Honaya Monei Setora. I'm from the Republic of Botswana. I'm a trade policy expert at the AFCFTA Secretariat here in Accra, Ghana, focusing on integrating women, youth, and SMEs within the AFCFTA agreement. And let me also take advantage to appreciate the organizers of this dialogue, AGA, which actually has been convening these dialogues as far as 2021. Perhaps that was my first engagement with the dialogue, to say that this is the implementation that young people are looking forward to. I don't know if you as young people in this room realize that this is the engagement that as young people we are looking forward to. But let me also appreciate the theme of the year of the African Union. That actually acknowledges the fact that Africa is where it is because of colonization. We are where we are because of colonization. When we speak of corruption, there's corruption because we were colonized. Our leaders had to go through rough patches for them to be leaders. So they are being greedy with the money because it is new to them. And it's because of colonization. Africa is where it is because of colonization in terms of youth unemployment. So this theme is very important to the African youth in the room. Why? Because it does not only speak into reparations as compensations, but also it tells you that the reparations shouldn't just be compensation, but we should take it as economic justice to Africans. But it also tells us, as the young people in the room, that there is a mindset change that has to happen. We have acknowledged the fact that we are where we are because of because of colonization. And now it is time for our young people to also have that mindset change, to know that for us to gain this economic justice, it is also upon ourselves as young people to act right, engage ourselves when we are requested to be engaged. And that is where the conversation of the establishment of the AFCFTA agreement comes in. Allow me to get deep into that before I answer your question. As you may all know, the AFCFTA agreement was signed in 2018 by African Union state parties. And this is an agreement that says, as African Union state parties, we are very much ready to trade amongst ourselves at very ease and, if possible, low cost, so that we are able to promote inter-Africa trade. Why is it important for us to promote inter-Africa trade? So that we are able to improve our GDPs in our nations if we are able to actually trade among ourselves. So this agreement has been ratified by 49 countries so far in Africa, and it was adopted in 2018. So you could see the urgency that the state parties, or actually African governments, understood, which becomes one of the most agreements within the African Union to be signed in that short period of time. It actually comes with protocols, which are instruments that are going to assist this agreement to be implemented. We have the protocol in trade in goods, which will be the protocol that will facilitate trade of tangible goods, but also we have the protocol in trade and services, as well as other phase 2 protocols that may take time for me to dwell under. But the most important protocol that is also very relevant to this conversation is the protocol on women and youth in trade, which becomes the first ever protocol to actually integrate women, youth, and SMEs within this free trade area. And what is this protocol advocating for? Is that we acknowledge the fact that most of the trade that is being done in Africa, the numbers that account, women and youth actually accounts for major trade in Africa, as well as small and medium enterprises, in which actually reports have given much evidence that small medium enterprises in Africa are also the ones that are actually giving more jobs to the young people. So why wouldn't we actually find a protocol or a framework that can actually empower them in terms of scalability, but also most importantly, sustainability? So the AFCFTA is here, and it is up to young people to now decide, because we are saying that we are very ready and Africans are very ready to trade among each other. So it is up to the young person to take advantage of this AFCFTA agreement and its protocols, to become innovative and find out what are you going to sell among the African countries? What are you going to trade in terms of either in goods or services? But what is also important is for you to decide, are you going to be with us in Africa to develop Africa through this AFCFTA, or are you also going to go through the Mediterranean Sea to run away from the problems that the colonizer has put us under and you are still going back to the colonizer. So I think the African Union has a lot of initiatives that are on board. I think people spoke about the African Union Youth Charter. The African Union Youth Charter is there. How do you, as youth organizations in civil society, advocate for certain provisions to be implemented? And how are you also taking advantage of the protocol on women and youth in trade? So when you speak of diaspora as somebody who is implementing the AFCFTA, I would say come back home. The free trade area is open for your innovations. We want you to come back so that you are able to at least provide your expertise of living in America, where we believe it is more modernized in terms of structure, but I don't know if governance is structured well enough more than any other countries in Africa. But come back so that we are able to build Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Your points are well noted. Now, Mr. Melissa, from your perspective, what is one bold action the youth or young people should take to drive justice in Africa? One bold action they should take to drive justice in Africa. Okay, I repeat. From your perspective, what's one bold action, or actions, if you have more than one, that the young people should take to drive justice in Africa?
No, thanks. I think, as I said, like everything, whether it's justice, business, everything, religion, it goes back to politics. So we need to have a bold and have courage to actually make sure that we participate and enforce and make sure that we hold accountable our leaders. And we must go and go through our constitution, because remember, constitution is not like it's unchangeable. Constitution change according to the conditions. Like, for example, the constitution that we have at home, it was drafted in the 1996 when we just came into power after apartheid. But there's a big caution there that says we need to amend the constitution, especially when it comes to land caution, because we are dragging our legs in terms of land distribution and getting back our land. So we just need to make sure that we hold our leaders accountable and make sure that the justice, we know the laws. Because if you don't know the laws, then you can't talk about justice. So education as well plays a role in these things, and make sure that as young people, we don't spend a lot of time on social media researching about things that doesn't make any change in the society. So education as well, it also plays a role, and you will know how to address the question. Thanks.
Thank you. Ganaya, please, can you build on that?
The question again?
One bold action
okay.
the young people in Africa should take to drive justice.
Okay, definitely. I think it will still drive me back to advocacy for governments to ratify certain policies. I would advocate, of course, for the protocol on women and youth in trade, that they must understand that this protocol will give them preferential treatment for them to be able to trade across Africa. If I'm in Nigeria and I want to sell my shea butter to Botswana, as a woman or a youth, I should not be going through certain hurdles for my product to be there. And the provisions are in the protocol. Any kind of preferential treatment that you need are in the protocol. So it is even up to you to ensure that as you are doing your advocacy, some of these protocols, you know them by head, so that when the policymakers, the government are bringing you on board, you actually have good knowledge for you to defend or present your case on what is supposed to be done. I'm going to give you an example of some of our robust operational tools under the AFCFTA that are very Pan-African, trying to, of course, drive the inter-African trade, which is the Pan-African payment, Pan-African settlement, PAPS, Pan-African payment settlement system. It is one of the Pan-African payment systems that will be used within this Africa continental free trade. And why? Because normally when we trade among each other as Africa, we of course have to use a third currency, and that is of course a dollar or a euro. But the Pan-African payment settlement system allows us as Africa to trade among each other without necessarily having to use a third currency. So this is an operational instrument that has been adopted by almost 13 central banks in Africa so far. Go and learn about it and advocate for its implementation or adoption within your financial banks in your countries. We also have a few, somebody spoke about issues of lack of monitoring, which is very important for the successful implementation of the AFCFTA. And I don't know how many entrepreneurs are in the room that will really understand the importance of this AFCFTA agreement taking into place, because it is the one that will actually get you market access across African state parties. But we also have certain operational tools like the monitoring and the online monitoring, the online NT monitoring mechanism, which actually would allow you as a woman and youth in trade to be able to monitor or report any other issue that or challenge that you are actually encountering when you're trying to trade within the AFCFTA. So I think the bold step is advocacy, but the other bold step would also be young people, let us be engaged into things that are actually very much beneficial to us. If I'm to ask the room right now, how many of you know AFCFTA? I will get few hands. And how many of you know Davido and his wife? Definitely. So it is like that. We actually focus on things that don't necessarily develop our lives, and then we are the same young people who comes and say that we are not being involved. How are the governments and leaders able to trust you if you come without a case? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your insightful opinions. Now over to you, Mr. Yo. How can young people, because you know it's very easy to say we should speak out, we should advocate, but the question is, how can young people, how can they make their voices impossible to be ignored? Because it's very easy for us to speak out, but are they going to listen? So how can we make it impossible for them to ignore our voices as young people?
Well, for us back home, I talk San. I talk San and I tell Pax. That's what many young people back home, know me as. When they see you all like this, they say, this guy is coming with Pac and he's always talk with San. Look, I'm from the background of activism, and I've been there for a very long time. I started young, and until now I'm in my 30s, you're saying that. So it took me time, actually, to understand the situation and to understand, actually, the dynamics on how young people work. First, it is very difficult when you are advocating in an oppressive regime whereby they see voices as a threat to them when they are in power. And the scenario of South Sudan is known to everyone in East Africa, in Central Africa, in Southern Africa, and also in Northern Africa as well, in which we never had an election, and our government is being run based on appointments. They should appoint you today, or maybe tomorrow evening also the president decided to relieve you from that, in which they are appointing incompetent gentlemen and women who are looking voices or looking young people, who are also there to oppress them, in which it became very challenging to all of us in the human rights advocacy spaces and also in civic education as well and civic engagement, in which Pan-African Peacemakers Alliance look at it as a threat because we are an action-oriented young people. Whether we have money or we don't have money, we are on the front, we are there. So we came up with a strategy whereby we're saying that, guy, we need actually a strategic action or a collective action whereby we should bring a numbers of young people together who are sharing the same cause with us so that we can move forward and we can challenge the status quo. Now we are members of more than 15 coalition or network in the region, at the national level as well, and on the continent levels as well. What I'm trying to say is, young people are so much divided when it comes to these boys, but we came to realize that that should be our obstacle. We need to work with the like-minded organization who are actually sharing the cause. So we build consensus, we build coalition in which now it is very impossible actually for the state, let me just use that word, for the state security actually to challenge. If we are issuing a statement right now, how many of us? I think we are 100 plus, right? So it is more powerful than issuing a statement as an individual or as an organization. So we form coalition, we form network, and we also very strategic in our work, whereby we have allies within. There are some people also, who are also there, do not like actually what is going around. They are very influential, and they are ready also to work with young people. So, and second is that also, we also influence other young people, the competent one, to join political parties, to champion the youth agendas there, for example. And now we have some of them. Before, in 2018 peace agreement at Addis Ababa, there were certain young people who went actually and participated in that. When they come back, for instance.
Sorry, I have to pause it there.
Awesome. Let me just let me just say it one word and just join. And second, that also, we are working in network, as I said, in a coalition, in whereby it is very difficult or very hard for a certain individual actually to come and say it and target you all, for example. You're saying that. So it will target the entire network. Second is that we are also joining the advisory council within our countries, in which, and I do believe that there are so many young people who are here, who are running initiative, and they want to work alone. You're saying that. It is very difficult. You're saying that. For us actually to push these issues of justice together, we need collective voices, and also we need solidarity from other countries. For example, we have a good friend from Kenya, we have a good friend from Ethiopia, and we have a good friend also from South Africa. When someone from us get in trouble, they rise up, and it will capture the media. Second is that the social media that I want to finalize with it. So that, and most of these guys, that they are seeing social media as just a platform, that. And some of them, they don't know the real impacts of using social media effectively. So majority of young people now are getting out from traditional way of doing things to the digitalization aspect, in which if they oppress us here, they block us here, then we shift to social media. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your insight. Please, Mr. Stephen, briefly, 1 minute. Do you have anything to add to what he has said?
The only thing that I want to add, I think just picking up from what my brother shared, is really the biggest role that we have is to be truth tellers in state building. Because often what is happening in these conflicts and atrocities is that there's a reframing of narratives. There's an erasure of what happens as well when conflicts come in place. So we have the responsibility to be truth tellers. And young people have already been leading. One other bold thing we need to think about is building a critical mass. Namibia is a fantastic example where these young people that are appointed, those who ran for elected office, participating and co-creating governance. And I think that can be spread across the continent as well. And I know some areas are definitely limited in terms of a shrinking space. But we can provide cover for one another as we start to champion and support the young people that are actually occupying those spaces, cheering them on, being their biggest cheerleaders, not trying to demean them down. The last thing I want to just say is, in terms of issues around state building and good governance, young people have been raising the alarm already. When they look at iconography in Namibia, for example, and across the continent, where they're saying these statues that celebrate liberation, that celebrate colonialism, etc., let's pull those down. Let's reimagine what kind of iconography you can put up in our states. When you think about museums, when you think about memory holding, let's redesign that. And young people have been using social media, they've been using marches, they've been using hashtags, they've been using white paper briefs that they've been submitting. So there has been a lot of action taking place where young people have been participating. And what they have basically said is, we're going to be the moral compass of our nation. We're going to raise the consciousness of our people, because again, we must recognize that these issues of reparations and justice and healing is hard and it's tough, it's difficult, it's not an easy conversation to have. And young people have taken the harder path and the courageous path to say we're going to be the truth tellers in this world.
Thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to take advantage before we left the podium, some of the young people who have really advocated for certain policies to be implemented. And we have evidently seen governments actually coming forth, actually appointing young people in government positions. We have my sister, she was there with Lennon. Oh, I was about to congratulate her. She was the youngest member of parliament in Namibia. And we now even have the youngest minister in Namibia at the age of 28. Even Lennon himself is representing the young people at the APRM ECOSOC, but also not forgetting some of the leaders that are in the room. Mr. William Karu, he's the head of the ECOSOC, and prior to the ECOSOC gaining its feet within the African Union, I can attest to the fact that he's one of the leaders who have always supported initiatives that are run by young people. He even when during the ECOSOC establishment made sure that NGOs that are actually led by young people are also recognized within that platform. But also Ambassador Salah, you know, these are people when I was growing up, I was looking forward to, and to see them continuing with this work as young people, we have to appreciate them, but also do more and show them that the opportunities they have provided to you coming here did not really waste their time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard from our distinguished speakers, and at this point, we're going to bring you in. Please, if you have questions for us, kindly make it brief and introduce yourself and state who your question is directed to. If you direct it to a particular person, please. 1 minute, 3 persons. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. My name is Redwan Mohammed, the first deputy speaker for National Youth Mock Parliament and also Speaker of Parliament for Kenya Students Parliament House. My question is very short. How can we include youth in real decision making instead of discussions? Thank you.
Please, over to you. Gentleman behind him.
Okay. My name is Emmanuel Mwendo Akilu from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm a writer and a researcher. My question is about when we talk about young people, when they hold their leaders accountable, like we saw in Kenya in the 2024 Gen Z-led protest. You find sometimes the young people are either threatened by being abducted or getting arrested and charged with crimes that they have not done. So how can the AU and also how can we young people navigate this crisis when it comes, when we all leaders accountable, we are threatened and we are told stop asking too much questions and just live, like you are told, just let life be. So how can we navigate in such scenarios? Yes.
Thank you. Ladies? Okay. Please, Juliet, you have the floor.
My name is Juliet, and I am a youth advocate. And my question goes to Mr. Musamba. He said youth must participate in terms of promoting democracy. So if we, the youth, can participate in terms of promoting democracy, what are some of the process we need to go through in order to enhance effective youth development in terms of decision-making and democracy? Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, ladies first. Please.
Hello, thank you. I'm Jessica Latte, representing National Youth Authority, Gacentra. And one thing I would like to say is a little contribution. I believe Africa is waiting for its second independence, not from this corona masters, but also from foreign powers and the fear and silence of fragmentations. One thing I think is, let us be generation that reclaim stolen stories, build future in our image, and refuse to ask for permission to thrive. Mr. Jonathan, the previous panelist, made a little suggestion and demonstration with the language. Whilst we are waiting to unite Africa, can we also work on having one language? Because I believe language is more than communication. It's our identity and our sovereignty. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Who wants to start?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Melissa, please.
Yeah, let me just start with the question raised by my sister there in terms of how young people can participate. Firstly, like I said, we need to mobilize ourselves and be organized and make sure that we participate in political formations. As young people, there are different political parties. You just need to check in terms of the political parties' constitutions and then align yourself with the one that you believe serves the interest or your interest or young people's interest. So it's not an easy thing. There's still what you call a pushback. We are told about experience, and nobody is born with experience. You gain experience along the way. So we just need to make sure that we participate in the spaces. Like, for example, first thing you need to ask yourself a question: are you a member of a civil organization or political party? Because that's where the decisions are made and where you can make what you call make a contribution. And then there's also a question about how we can include young people in decision making. It's a difficult thing. Some old people want to die in power. It's not an easy thing to release power or to move out of things. So we need to make sure that by hook or crook, you get in there by force, mobilizing young people. I mean, in South Africa, we saw for us to get rid of apartheid, it was young people at the forefront who were on the streets mobilizing. If the government doesn't listen to the citizen, young people, you go on the streets, the government will listen. We can attest to that from South Africa. If you're mobilized and organized, the government will listen. And it's a painful thing because it also sometimes includes sharing of the blood. Some people die, sacrifice, fighting. So we just need to have courage and not give up and not be deterred from the cause. So we just need to make sure that we fight. It can take years and years and years. I mean, in South Africa, young people went in the street in 1976. They died in numbers. We only got our freedom in 1994. So sometimes it takes years. You need to gain courage and not give up. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, please.
Yes, I wanted to take the question on the One Africa language. to say that the African Union has also declared that Swahili would be the language that would be used by African countries. So those who do not speak Swahili could also advocate for the government to now include it in schools, because I think also in Botswana in 2022 it was introduced in primary schools. So if we also support this initiative, we can actually have that effective results to have one common language, which is very important, particularly as we are going to trade across Africa at a very much facilitated manner. And the other question from a gentleman from Kenya, when he was speaking of holding leaders accountable, particularly when young people try to advocate and they get arrested. And I would say, yes, we have witnessed the Gen Z strike in Kenya, and other countries, of course, have been going through the same. But also remember that as young people, we also want to be heard, but also trusted, right? I'm a Jehovah's Witness, so my mother would say, if you are shouting at God, do you think he will listen to you? So when you also approach these issues, particularly the fact that we are also a Gen Z and a digital age group, advocacy is actually so much easier when you advocate online. You just make something trend, and they will respond. We have seen this happening in other countries, even in Botswana. If you are to make my president a trend today, he will be responding by tomorrow. So let us also, as young people, learn from all that we have done and come up with better ways of how we can advocate and be listened to by our leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. You've highlighted very critical points. Mr. Yo, do you have anything to add? Okay. Please, let's limit it to 1 minute.
Yeah, activists talk a lot. Huh? Yeah, so I just want to emphasize more on what he just said. On the political participation of young people, the involvement of it actually. And also don't forget that there are political parties who are outside there, are you saying that, and there are so many young people also who are interested more to join politics. But the moment that they register it and they become members of that political parties, they turn. Because there's a language in politics in which interest is what drives them. That's why you see so many young people participating in such political arena. They have energy, they have everything, and they want to be there. But when they reach there, now the manifesto of the party itself will convene and will silence them. So what I'm trying to say here is, it is not bad actually to join politics. It is very good. But how can you join politics? You can enjoy politics by showing up. You're saying that. Showing up in a way that you participate in certain meeting, in civic education, educate yourself about political issues, the things that are really affecting you at home. And don't forget that the political manipulation as well will be there on you, in which if you are a young person, it is very hard for you actually to influence certain decision. You're saying that in that. But he just mentioned something about, I don't know who said that, about the diplomacy language kind of thing. You think that? So majority of young people around, we have energy, we have courage, we have everything, right? And we speak with power. You think that? And most of our elders, most of our fathers, most of our uncles and mothers, they are not used to such. So you should know how to play a game when you are in certain location, when you are in certain contexts, for instance. When you are in political parties as a young person, if you want to rise, if you are critiques to them, they will not actually promote you, they will detain you. But if you have an agenda as a young person, you need to play a diplomatic role. When you get into that, like Julius Malema of South Africa, he was not vocal like the way he is when he was in African Congress, AFC, yes. He was not like that now. But look the way that he's just actually vocal, because he built, he has power, he has whatever he takes. So that's a message that I want to say. To my brother there from Kenya, who mentioned about the Gen Z protest, what we what is the most important here is the solidarity. When young Kenyans are being killed, all of us in the region, we show solidarity, we write petition. And also, some of us even reach into the African Union levels, whereby we are telling them that there are something going on here. That is the spirit that we actually want as young people. And plus the East African community as well. And don't forget that the geopolitics around all this, the bilateral as well. You need to talk good, For example, most when you go back home, most of our officials.
I have to pause you, please, for want of time.
All right.
Just summarize, please.
All right. Just because I'm very radical. I'm a true still. I'm very radical, by the way. I'm not radical now. Very radical. So back home, it is very hard. Even when they see me like this, they will say, no, we don't want to meet with this group because of y'all. So what I used to do is I just influence a bit there, just behind the scene, and then I tell people, you just go and talk to them. I will just sit and discuss all my issues. So you should also use that kind of thing. You should play around. You should identify people who will help you when you are not around. When you are not on the room as well or on the table, you have people who will speak on your behalf. That is what I do. That is what I've been doing there. Because most officials, they scare of me when they see me. They're saying that this boy is, is troublemaker. He's saying that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Stephen, please.
I'll just quickly respond to Emmanuel's question around shrinking space for young people that speak up. I think it's incumbent upon us who are outside to be able to become their champions, as Solidarity was raised, even if it's just financially supporting them, even if it's just raising a hashtag, writing petitions to our governments, to the AU, etc. But because one of the things that often happens in spaces like this, it can be very isolating for many young people. And those who then observe what is happening to those young people when they protest or speak up or dissent, then discourages them from raising their voices again. So I think it's important for us as a wider demographic of young people to not let any young person's violence being perpetrated against them by state be normalized, because a state is supposed to be the one responding to healing. But if they're the one doing the traumatizing, I think it's important for us to also raise our voices in support for those guys as well.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists, for your very insightful opinions and clarity. And to our beautiful audience, thank you for your contribution. I'm sorry we ran out of time. We've seen from what our speakers have said that reparations are not just about redress, they are about restoring dignity. And they've made us understand that this is shaped by persistence, advocacy, and ensuring implementation. So I will leave us with this. If our elders and our leaders forget, we must remind them, because the future of Africa is not only in the hands of the elders, it is already in the voice of the youth. Thank you so much. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for this panel. Thank you, Sandra, for the excellent moderation, Yuval, Stephen, Melissa, and Guanya. There's a slight change on the program. Now we're going to push the health break after the closing. So now we will move to the last session of this program, the Continental Youth Consultations. you so much, Ambassador. Now we